Good evening. This is Jeff J. Brown, China Right Radio Sino Land, Shenzhen, just south of the Tropic of Cancer. Got a thought-provoking, challenging podcast tonight, especially for Westerners out there. Lots of hyperlinks. Go to the original YouTube and SoundCloud channels or chinarising.puntopress.com. And go to the article, and everything will be there. This one is entitled, Selfishness is Enshrined in Western Culture While Despised in Chinese and Indigenous Civilizations. I just read Roxanne Dunbar-Ortiz's majestic and Indigenous Peoples History of the United States. I encourage you to do the same regardless of your nationality or origins, as it honestly recounts human history and current events across the globe. While I was reading in shocking detail about the relentless genocidal destruction of the Americas First Nations, one theme kept popping up was the juxtaposition of the natives' socialist sharing Commonwealth civilizations versus the Western capitalist worship of selfishness, competition, individualism, and insatiable drive for never-ending acquisition and consumption. Here is a typical refrain from her book, and I added in one sentence in bold font. And the quote is, the defect of the reservation system was apparent. It is socialist Henry George's system, and under that there is no enterprise to make your home any better than of your neighbors. Quote, there is no selfishness, which is at the bottom of civilization. Till this people will consent to give up their lands and divide among their citizens so that they can each own the land he cultivates, they will not make much more progress. End of quote by Senator Henry Dawes, pushing the General Allotment Act of 1887, a white man's law which was passed to plunder what little lands were not yet stolen from the indigenous nations. Most of the world's cultures outside the Christian Jewish West were socialist and communal since the dawn of organized civilization. It was because they were so successful, so prosperous, healthy, and harmonious that Western capitalism had to annihilate them, to expunge the manifest truth of a shared vision for planet Earth and human relations, only to then enslave the surviving locals and extract their natural resources. Jesus Christ was the antithesis of selfishness, which is why he was murdered by rich elites. The same goes for Muhammad and his followers of newborn Islam, who were persecuted and killed for preaching socialist values. India's Mahatma Gandhi was assassinated for being an unselfish, wealth redistributing socialist. Capitalists barely stomached Martin Luther King Jr. when he marched against racism. However, as soon as he started demanding socialism at home for the 99%, he signed his own death warrant at the hands of the U.S. government and the deep state that runs it. Over the millennia, everywhere the West has dominated, millions of nameless voices fighting for social justice and economic equality have been ruthlessly snuffed out by the elites, bankers, generals, politicians, and each era's version of rapacious landowners, merchants, and capitalists. For Jesus, it was temple money lenders and their usury which kept the poor on their hungry knees. For Muhammad, it was greedy merchants who were making fortunes off worshippers going to Mecca's Kaaba to buy icons and idols. Gandhi railed against the West's racist, extractive colonialism, and as mentioned, King denounced the U.S.'s imperial, genocidal onslaught starting in 1607 with the founding of its slave economy and the extermination of 18 million indigenous citizens in country, with 100 million wiped out in all of North Central South America, and still ongoing. Just follow Telesur, Telesur, for a month, the website, to see the litany of headlines about labor leaders and social activists, many of them natives, being kidnapped, disappeared, and murdered in cold blood across Central and South America. The United States sends secret armies, otherwise known as special operations, all over the world, especially Africa, to assassinate anti-imperial locals and their groups who fight for their country's 99%. This while trying to destroy every country that is anti-imperialist: China, Russia, Iran, Syria, Venezuela, North Korea, Cuba, Eritrea, and indigenous nations around the world, to name just a few. Today's anti-West leaders are very aware of the problem. At the just concluded ALBA, A-L-B-A, summit, Nicaraguan president spoke truth to power, and I added one word in bold. President Ortega said, in addition, he stressed that capitalism does not believe in solidarity, since by nature is a system based on selfishness. He said, because of that attitude, it does what it will do to hoard, dominate, and expand, and even kill each other. We cannot expect anything else. He said, before adding that slavery is imposed by the tyranny of global capitalism. There are many forms of slavery, which is why humanity is struggling in so many conflicts, because wealth is concentrated among a few and poverty multiplies. Below is an excerpt from a book by the Neoliberal Institute of Economic Affairs, where they spent 233 pages trying to deny the obvious quoted capitalist realities. In the quoted tome, mainstream apologist Ha-Joon Chang says all we need to do is regulate capitalism, which has never worked more than a generation, since the government always gets suborned by ever-increasing concentrations of wealth and power. The Institute of Economic Affairs had this quote from Ha-Joon Chang's book. In his best-selling book, 23 Things They Don't Tell You About Capitalism, Ha-Joon Chang says that free market economists regard people as tunnel-visioned, self-seeking robots, totally selfish, and selfish amoral agents. Free market ideology, he claims, is built on the belief that people won't do anything good unless they are paid for it or punished for not doing it. End of quote from the IEA book. Of course, quote, free market, end of quote, is one of many capitalist euphemisms for to rape, enslave, and plunder, since the elites always co-opt the political system to pay for and write laws to make it all nice and legal. Recall the aforementioned General Allotment Act of 1887, plus countless more extorted from conquered and massacred peoples across the earth. Need I mention the many egregious, unequal Western and Japanese treaties forced on the Chinese during their post-Opium War, Western drug cartel century of humiliation, 1839 to 1949, something I've written much about. Western treaties and international laws have always been self-justifying fig leaves since the Christian church and governments invoke their colonial doctrine of discovery, meaning wherever you invade, just plant a flag and it's yours to rape and plunder. And the racist terra nullius, T-E-R-R-A and then N-U-L-L-I-S, which essentially means the natives are subhumans, thus the lands are unoccupied, so you can exterminate and enslave those godless vermin. These Aryan Judeo-Christian supremacist policies are still in force, but today are artfully ensconced in a tsunami of government, corporate, orchestrated mainstream propaganda, Orwellian textbooks, and media. The antidote is to read alternative news sources like this one, acknowledge the West's thousands of military bases, navies, national and proxy armies around the world, and the chaos they are creating on every continent. Okay, maybe not Antarctica. Then the hard part for most people is to admit that the source of all this human misery and spiraling destruction of Earth's ecosystems are directly due to Western capitalism. While selfishness is constantly denied in the capitalist West, the evidence is manifestly omnipresent. Ayn Rand, and it's A-Y-N-R-A-N-D, first and last name, the rock star goddess of neoliberal capitalist individualism and exploitation, even wrote a mega-selling book entitled The Virtue of Selfishness. She anointed selfishness as, quote, enlightened. Tell that to the 1 billion plus mostly dark-skinned non-Christian people who have been exterminated since the 15th century across our pale blue dot, and who are continuing to be sacrificed by the millions every year on the altar of Western imperialist capitalism. This all flies in the face of global, communal, native cultures and in communist socialist Chinese civilization as well. To call someone selfish, in Chinese it is zisili, Z-I-S-I-Z-I-L-I, is to say they have, quote, self-interest, self-profit, end of quote. And in Chinese society, it is one of the most hurtful epithets you can call someone. In the first book of the China trilogy, 44 Days, I wrote about how this would be the ultimate desperate slur I would call someone on a public bus or train who absolutely insisted on smoking in the crowded vehicle. I hated doing it since it caused such a huge loss of face. So it was always the third time to ask, and this last time they always put out their cigarette. The public shame of being recognized as zili was too much to bear. To be selfish is anti-Buddhist, anti-Daoist, anti-Confucian, anti-communist, and anti-socialist, and as all these belief/societal systems are grounded in communal sharing and mutually beneficial cooperation. Selfishness is also anti-Indigenous nations, and for them and all the other peoples around the world who are fighting against imperialist capitalism and for social justice and economic equality, the struggle is never ending. This is Jeff J. Brown, China Rising Radio Sinoland, Shenzhen, signing out. Thank you.